All right, so on this one, what we need to do is we need to convert the word problem into linear programming problem, and then convert that into our system of equations with equals instead of less than or equal to, and then convert that into our simplex tableau. So a little bit to do. Basically, we're doing 44, and it says repeat this problem, but under the assumption that no more than 30,000 can be invested in the money market funds. So that's going to be an extra subject to thing. And so what it says is investor has at most $100,000 to invest in government bonds, mutual funds, and money market funds. The average yield for government bonds, mutual funds, and money market are 8%, 13%, and 15% respectively. Now, the investor's policy requires that the total amount invested in mutual and money market funds not exceed the amount invested in government bonds. And now, how much should be invested in each type to order to maximize that return? And what is the maximum return? All right, so we have to set some variables first here. So let's let x1 equal government at 8%. Let's let x2 equal the mutual at the 13%, and let x3 equal the money market at the 15%. Now, if we want to write out our linear programming problem, let's maximize our P is equal to, now we just take our numbers, 0.08x1 plus 0, maybe we should put a 0 here, 0.13x2 plus 0.15x3, and that's going to be subject to, and now we have a couple things. We know that the total x1 plus x2 plus x3 has to be less than or equal to the $100,000. Okay. And we know that it said that when we add two of them together, which two was it again? Mutual money market added together, it cannot exceed the government bonds. So if we look at that, that's going to be the government bonds has to be less than the government bonds. So x2 plus x3 has to be less than or equal to x1. Now, the key here is, does that make sense on how we're writing these normally? Not really. So maybe let's write that over here. X2 plus x3 less than or equal to x1. Now, let's erase this and rewrite it in a form like we know it's going to be in a tableau. So that means let's take this over here. So minus x1 plus x2 plus x3 has to be less than or equal to 0. Okay, so that's going to be kind of a trick on some of these problems. You're going to have to write it like this first and then take it back over. And so then it's in the form where we have all the x's on one side and then the numbers on the right side. Now, one last thing is for this problem, no more than 30,000 can be invested in the money markets. So what does that mean? The X3 has to be less than or equal to 30,000. And then we have X1, X2, and X3 have to be greater than or equal to 0. All right. Now, let's put all of this into equality format, okay? And so what we need to put it into before we make basically our tableau. And so I think we can get this on this page and then we'll make the tableau on the next page. So with this one, we're going to have, looks like x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus s1 is equal to 100,000. This one, minus x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus s2 equals 0. And then we have x3 plus s3 is equal to 30,000. And then we have to do our top one and take everything over here. And so we're going to have a minus 0.08x1 minus 0.13x2 minus 0.15x3 plus p equals 0. And then we have x1, x2, x3, s1, s2, s3 all have to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so that's going to be what we put into our table form. Okay, so with that said, now let's go write a table because I don't know if we're going to have enough room to put the table and all this stuff here. Well, maybe we can try it here. Let's at least put one table here so we can read it as we go. So that's x1, x2, x3, s1, s2, s3, P, and then our line. And then we have S1, S2, S3, and P. And so now we can write that in the table here. So it looks like a 1, a 1, a 1, a 1, 0, 0, 0, and then 100,000. Okay. Then we have what? A minus 1, a 1, a 1, a 0, a 1, a 0, a 0, and a 0. And then we have a 0, a 0, a 1, and then a 0, a 0, a 1, and a 0, and 30,000. And then we have a minus 0.08, a minus 0.13, a minus 0.15, a 0, a 0, a 0, a 1, and a 0. Okay. Now, biggest negative is this one. And so basically we're taking the 100,000 divided by 1, 0 divided by 1, and 30,000 divided by 1. Well, guess what? The quotients, we're not going to have a lot of room. So that's going to be, the smallest one is going to be this one. Okay, because 0 divided by anything is going to give us 0. So that's the smallest. So that means that's going to be our pivot point. All right. Now, with that, what we have to do is we're going to take, looks like minus, now these I'm not going to be able to write beside it because we're really out of room here. We're going to take a minus row 2 plus row 1, and that's going to be our new row 1. This is already 1, so we don't have to do anything here. We'll take a minus row 2 plus row 3, and that's our new row 3. And then we're going to take a 0.15 row 2 plus row 4, and that's going to be our new row 4. Okay. So we're going to do all those on the next page when we get there. And so, oh, we forgot to write what our entering and exit. So this is going to be where we enter, where my number, here we go, enter. And so this is going to be exit. So it's S1, X3, S3. So now we have X1, X2, X3, S1, S2, S3, P. Then we have a line. Then we have S1, and I said that was X3, then S3, and then P. All right, so which column or row stays the same? The this row stays the same. So this one's going to stay as negative 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, and then 0. And then we're going to take minus this plus that row. So that gave us a 2 and a 0 and a 0 and a 1 and a minus 1 and then 0, 0, and still 100,000. Okay. Now subtracting it that way we get 1, a minus 1, a 0, a 0, minus 1, 1, 0, and we still get 30,000 here. Okay. And then we have what here? We have 0.15 times that plus that. So it's going to be what? A minus 0.23. That's going to be a minus 0. Oh, no, that's not. It's going to be a plus point oh 02. And then that's going to be a 0, a 0.15, and 0, 1, and 0. All right. So now let me make sure all of that. So we're taking that times that, yeah, 15 and 8, 23, and 15. That's going to be 0.02. All right. So I think that looks good. So now the biggest negative, well, there's only one negative, so that's not too hard to figure out which negative that is. That's this one. So for our quotients, we're going to have what? We're going to have 100,000 divided by 2, which is going to be what? 50,000. This one we can't have because we can't have a negative. And then we have 30,000 divided by 1, so that's going to be 30,000. So that one is the smallest, and so we're going to pivot right there. Okay. And since it's a 1, we don't have to do anything there, so we can take row 3 plus row 2. That's my new row 2. I can take a minus 2 row 3 plus row 1, and that's my new row 1. And I can take a 0.23 row 3 plus row 4, and that's my new row 4. Okay, so I think that's all I need to do there. So let's go ahead and write all the new stuff. So this one now is enter. This one is exit. So we have, it looks like S1, X3, and now it's going to be X1, and then P, and that. All right. All right, so now what do we have? We have S1, X. Okay, so now that's going to be, what do we do? We took minus 2 times this plus that, so that's going to go 0, and then we have a 2, and then we have a 0, a 1, a 1, a minus 2, a 0, and then that's going to be only be 40,000. Okay. And then that's going to be a 0, and then a 0, then a 1, and a 0, a 0, a 1, and then a 0, and then add that together, that's going to be 30,000. The next row stays the same, so 1 minus 1, 0, 0, minus 1, 1, 0, and then 30,000. Then 0.23 times that row plus that row, so that's going to give us what? 0, negative 0.23, 0, 0, negative 0.08. That's going to be a 0.23. That's going to be a 1. And 0.23 times that's going to be 69, so 6,900. All right, I think that looks like it's going to be good. So now the smallest negative happens to be this one, and we can't have this here, and we can't have this one because those are both, 0 or negative. So that means our pivot has to go at that point there. So we don't even have to do a quotient because that has to be the pivot. And so now, if that's the pivot, we're going to take 1/2 row 1, and that's going to be our new row 1. And if we take half a row 1 plus row 3, that's going to be our new row 3. That one's already 0, so we're good there. This one, that's going to be, let me see here. Is that an easy number we can figure out? Do, 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 0.23 oh, that's a point. Is that a 2.3 or 2.1? Did I do that wrong? 2.3. So that's a negative. So that's a 2.1, not a 2.3. So that's okay. I just see that there. That's a problem because there's 2 here. That's 2.3 minus that plus that. So that's gonna be a 2.1. All right. So if we take 0.21 divided by 2, so if we take this times the 105, so if we take 0.105 times row 1 plus row 4. That's our new row 4. That will make that, yep, so that'll work. All right, so now we have to do this. So now this one is enter, this one is exit, and so now we'll have x2, x3, x1. All right, so we have x2, x3, x1, p, and we have x1, x2, x3, s1, s2, s3, p, and our line. All right, so thing we did first, we took half of that first row, and so that's going to be, where's my thing? Here it is, 0, and then we had a 1, and then a 0, and then that becomes a half. That was a half. That's going to be a minus 1, a 0, half of 40,000 is 20,000. All right, so the next row stays the same, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, and then that was 30,000. And then we took half of the first row, added it to this row, so that became a 1, and then a 0, and then a 0, and then a half. Then it becomes a minus a half. Then it becomes 0 and a 0. Half of 40 plus that, that's going to be 50. And then we took the 0.105 times that row, so that gave us 0, and then 0, and 0. And then that becomes 0.105. And then let's see what that does that become. So multiply that times. So that looks like 0.025 maybe. And that one becomes, what was that one again? 23, so that's 0.02. And that's a 1. And then 0.105 times that plus that looks like 11,100. And now we look here and stop because they're all positive. All right. So x1, x2, x3 are going to be values. So that means we're going to let S1, S2, S3 equals 0. So X1, X2, X3 are going to equal, X1 is going to be 50,000, and that's going to be money. So these are going to be $50,000. X2 is $20,000. X3 is $30,000. And our max P is going to be $11,100. Okay, so that is all of our information we get from our table. And again, these were, if we go all the way back here, these were adding up to be numbers that add up to 100,000. So that was $50,000, $20,000, $30,000 was invested. X1 was in, again, the government. X2 was in the mutual, and this was in the money market. Okay, so those were that, and I think that was what was that 8%, 13%, and 15%. Okay. All right, so problems can get longer, but they're still it's all not too hard as long as you have your calculator to figure out numbers if you can't multiply or add and stuff like that. All right, so let's stop there and come back for another one.